Our next speaker at the Local Wildlife Sites Virtual Symposium is going to be Dan Carpenter from Digital Ecology. And Dan is going to be talking about the problem of having lots of sites to deal with data for within an area, and how he's come up with a digital solution for managing this. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Kieran. Really pleased to be here to talk about this project. So I'm Dan Carpenter. I'm Director of Digital Ecology. In a previous role, I was an officer of the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre. So I know local environmental record centres well, and local wildlife sites and all of the work that goes on with them. But yeah, so today I'm here to talk about digital assets for local wildlife sites, and to talk to you about a project that I did with the North and East Yorkshire Ecological Data Centre, NEYEDC as I'm going to say from now on, to help them get the information about their local wildlife sites out to the people that need it. So, slides working. Local wildlife sites, we've heard a lot about them already today. The custodians of those data associated with local wildlife sites are largely held by local environmental record centres. Some are held by some of the wildlife trusts, and a few instances it might be a local authority that holds the data about local wildlife sites. But for local environmental record centres, alongside their data on species and on habitats, many of them also manage data for local wildlife sites, including their boundaries, so where a site is and what area it covers. The reasons for their designation, we heard from earlier about the different systems that local environmental record centres and local wildlife site systems have for designations, but also the species and the habitats and the data for those associated with those different sites.
Sorry, Dan, can I just interrupt? We can't actually see you at the moment. I think people, so you think your video's on now, so yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've just unpinned John. He was pinned for some reason,
great. Thank you.
He's unpinned.
Great. Hopefully you can see me now. So if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, so as we heard from Devon earlier, they have over 2,000 local wildlife sites. North and East Yorkshire have something very similar, and I imagine that across most record centres that are sort of operating at kind of county scales, that number would be similar across all of those. So we're talking about a lot of information, a lot of data that needs to be managed. New data is collected, and then that needs to be shared. So I'm sure most of you know this, but record centres share their data with partners, such as local authorities, national parks, AONBs, with organisations like the wildlife trusts. But they also provide those data as part of their data search services. And data searches are requested by a big range of organisations, but probably the biggest customer for those are ecological consultants like John and myself that work on behalf of developers and planning applications. So it's really important that that data is made available in an easy to read format, and it doesn't take a record centre too much time to put it together and share it. So I just wanted to quickly talk about the importance of local wildlife sites in the planning system. You heard from John, really good example of how, a site that was a local wildlife site came up for development, and the work that he's involved in mitigating and compensating for the impacts of development. But in many, many local plans, if not all local plans written by local authorities, local planning authorities, they will have policies that detail how local wildlife sites are supposed to be treated within the planning and development realm. So here are just two quick examples of those policies from Bracknell Forest, where I was their biodiversity officer, and Wiltshire Council, that say, and just to point out on what we call local wildlife sites, back when local fractional forest councils local plan was written, they were called wildlife heritage sites in that part of the world in Berkshire. So, you know, again, and yes, another name. They're now called local wildlife sites down there. But you know, the policies here set out, you know, what would happen or how applications for development would be treated if the site included or was entirely a local wildlife site. So it's really important that we know where local wildlife sites are, and we know why they're designated. And that's really important for the consultants working for developers and the developers themselves to understand what the likely impact might be from a development and what mitigation or compensation measures might be required when those impacts are unavoidable. And we've heard a lot already that local wildlife sites can comprise priority habitats, but they can also be designated for the species they support as well. And in some cases, in many cases, they may be the only example of a particular type of habitat or a particular assemblage or population of a species in an entire county. So they can be incredibly important. And therefore, impacts on local wildlife sites from development can be considerable. And therefore, it's important that developers and their consultants understand the reasons for a site's designation, whether or not that development site might support the same habitats or species as a local wildlife site, and what the impacts from that development might be. And increasingly, you know, we think of local wildlife sites in terms of their functional role within landscapes as perhaps stepping stones or corridors between other patches of the same or similar or even different types of habitat. And therefore, understanding how impacts on a local wildlife site might affect that landscape functionality or connectivity is really important. So making sure that the information about local wildlife sites is available in an easy to consume format is really important. And that's the role that local environmental records centres play. So what information do record centres share with consultants and other people that request data searches? Well, up in Northeast Yorkshire, they have two things. They have a citation and a survey report or site reports. And this is probably similar for many record centres, but there'll of course be some differences. The citation sets out the key information about a site. You've seen a couple of examples from John already this morning. Things like what it's called, where is it, when it was last surveyed, when it was designated. I might tell you something about the geology or the location in the landscape, or you know what its contribution to that might be. It will also probably set out the habitats that are there on site and maybe the species that have been recorded on the different surveys, and of course the reason for its designation. Why was this site designated as a local wildlife site? And a survey report will provide much of the same information, but it will also give more details about both the habitats and the species recorded on different surveys, and you know, surveys in the past as well, so how things might have changed over time, but giving you a more detailed picture of the biodiversity of the site. Some record centres may provide GIS data of the site's boundaries, the habitats that are on the site, the species that have been recorded there, or provide habitat maps. And it's that information that your ecological consultant, your developer, will use to help them assess development impacts and increasingly explore opportunities for improving local wildlife sites. So where you're not having to create new habitats in mitigation or compensation, like in John's example, maybe actually if you can avoid any impacts on the site, you can actually help to improve it as part of your development. So Northeast Yorkshire. Northeast Yorkshire Environmental Data Centre, NEYEDC, is the record centre for North and East Yorkshire, including the cities of York and Hull. They also cover the North York Moors and the Yorkshire Dales National Parks, and the Nidderdale, easy for me to say, and Howardian Hills AOMB. That wasn't easy for me to say. So the centres is an operating function of the Yorkshire and Humber Ecological Data Trust, which is a registered charity. And NEYEDC are accredited by ALERC, the Association for Record Centres. So, you know, that means that they've been assessed to be able to do their work as a data centre to a set of standards. So these are their sites across the sort of 3 schemes that they hold the data for in North and East Yorkshire. There's nearly 2,000 across York, North Yorkshire and the East Riding of Yorkshire. So that's a lot of data to manage, to keep up to date, and to be able to share with those people that need it. And NEYEDC have always shared local wildlife site citations and survey reports when they've been requested by a data search customer. However, in the past, creating those citations and survey reports was a sort of a manual process, you know, typing all the information from various sources into, you know, a sort of template, and therefore was only really done on demand. You know, when someone wanted one and there wasn't already one created, then somebody would have to sit down and create that. And you can imagine how long it might take to do that for 2,000 different sites, and it can take a fair amount of time to find all the data and create the outputs in that way. And so at the time before I started this project, there was only a relatively small percentage of sites that had either citations or survey reports ready to go. So the other thing is that, like in Devon, sites surveyed every year, so new information is gathered, new data is entered into various databases, and all of those citations and survey reports would need to be updated. And again, that process is also potentially quite time-consuming. And again, so if someone says, "Oh, can I have a citation for this local wildlife site?" and it was surveyed last year, then an updated report would need to be created. So NEYEDC came to me and said, "Look, we've got this problem. We need some way of making this process a bit easier and a bit quicker." So they asked me to create a tool that would allow them to quickly make these outputs and make updating them a bit easier. So just want to tell you a little bit about Digital Ecology. We're a sort of digital environmental consultancy. So our mission is to help ecologists, environmental scientists, and others embed digital technologies into their work. And we're really passionate about using open source technologies that help improve data collection, management, analysis, dissemination, sharing of environmental data with others, and hopefully making those processes more efficient, and in the process achieving better outcomes for the environment. So, you know, we're ecologists, we're data scientists, we're people that have worked in ecology and sort of record center contexts for years, and so we understand what ecologists do, and we also understand how to take those digital technologies and apply them to the problems that we've got in managing increasingly large amounts of data to do with the natural environment. I just wanted to talk a little bit about free open source software. Some of you might not be familiar with this idea, but as I said, Digital Ecology as a business is built upon and is a champion of free open source software. So free means that there's no cost to you to use that software, but it also means that there are no restrictions largely in how you use that software. So if someone makes available a piece of software and says, right, it's free and open source, you don't need to pay them any money for a license to use it, and you can use it however you like. You can also modify it, you can also improve it, you can also extend it so that it works better for you, and you have, you know, there's no need for you to necessarily share those improvements. The open part means that the source code that makes that software work is open. It's freely available, you can read it, you can understand what it's doing, which is great because you can see how things work. And it also means that people can come together to try and improve that software and make it better for everybody involved. So open source software is created by individuals, by communities, by companies, and there are a huge number of different open source software projects out there. And some of them you might be familiar with. Some of you might be familiar with QGIS, a free open source desktop GIS software used by ecologists and many other types of GIS users around the world. That is open source, created by a community, free to anyone to download and use. Some of you might be familiar with the Signal messaging apps, very similar to WhatsApp, whereas WhatsApp is owned by Facebook's parent company, and therefore has all of the issues associated with that. Signal is an open source equivalent, which means nobody owns it, anybody can use it, and it's designed so it doesn't steal your data. And then finally, some of you may be familiar with the programming language R, which is a way of creating code to do things with data, clean it, analyze it, share it. And Digital Ecology champions open source software to its customers, and that's because it lowers the barrier to entry for those customers. You can use a wide range of programs, and that means that organizations can make the best use of their data, but also it's not costing them huge amounts of money to do so. So it's these open source technologies that we've used to create the system for NEYEDC. So this is kind of what it looks like in a sort of diagrammatic form. It makes use of that of R, and R allows us to automate some of the steps in creating those outputs that we want, saving us huge amounts of time. And to do that, we've created a small database in a geo package that holds the site boundaries, the species data, the habitat data, and all the other data that's required to make those reports. Again, a geo package is an open source file database format, familiar, I'm sure, to users of QGIS. And we can store several different data sets in one file. That means it's very portable. It means that users of QGIS can use it, our users can use it, and many other people. And the key tool in all of this is called R Markdown. And R Markdown is a report authoring tool, which allows us to combine plain text, so the things you'd normally write in a Word document, with code. So we can incorporate those two things together. And that allows us to create a template report from which we can then filter data from the database for a unique site and produce the output. So we filter that data from the database to only the site of interest, and then print out the data in our report into the correct place. We can also use R to create maps, which we can put into our reports. And so we can read the spatial data from the geo package and create a map from each site. So this saves NEYEDC officer time from typing all of those data into a Word template or copying and pasting it from other sources. And it takes about 20 seconds to create one report. And I think when I ran them all the very first time, it took about 4 hours to do all 2,000 of them. But that's still a lot less time than it would have been for one person to sit there and create all 2,000 reports in one go. 20 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but when you do a live demo, as I'm about to do, it feels like an age. So I just want to kind of demonstrate how this works and sort of talk you through it a little bit. So hopefully you can see that okay. This first screen here on the left-hand side is the Markdown template that we use. You can see the logo, you can see we've got blocks of code down here, and then a little bit further down, if we scroll through, we can start to see the plain text that's going to be written into the citation in this case. So this is just plain text written into a table structure, and then the blue here is the code that will fetch the results from the database and print it out in the right place. Now, the one key thing in this report is this bit up here, this parameters entry here. And so what we can do is we can programmatically change that parameter for a different site. And instead of having the one that's hard coded into there, a new one will be provided and a new report comes out. So let's give it a go, shall we, and see what happens. So this is my script. Don't want you to worry about that. So the basic idea is just to show how it works. And the first thing we need to do is we need to provide a code for a local wildlife site. So you can either provide one code or a series of codes that that are unique to each of the local wildlife sites in the system. So we do that. Just run that little line there, and then let's just get rid of that. I don't need to see that. And then we have a few libraries that we need to load to make sure that we can use the functions that are in there. And then this bit of code here is the bit that does all the hard work. It says, take the parameter that we've created for the local wildlife site and provide it to the template, our markdown document, and create the output that we want. So we do all that, and then we just do this last little line here. I'll run that, and it should go away. And you should see at the bottom down here, we've got some processing going on at the moment. It's creating a map. I told you 20 seconds is a very long time when you're doing a live demo. And in a minute, it will change to show you that it's printing out the map. There we go, printing the map. And then we should get, in just a couple more seconds, a load of gobbledygook, there you go, that says I am now creating the output. And if you watch that window on the right hand corner over here, in a minute you'll see a document pop up. And that is the citation for this site SEO 9-27 that has just been created. So if I click on that, nothing happens. Live demos are always an absolute minefield. Let me go over this side and find it. So I just want to show you that what it looks like. Comes up over there. Bear with me 1 second. Just going to open it on the other window, of course. But anyway, the point is that here we go. This is it. That we've now created a citation for the Leyburn Shore local wildlife site with all the information that you need to know about that site. Okay, and a little site map on the next page. There we go. So that's fantastic. We can now run individual citations like that, or we can run a bunch of them, or in fact we can actually update every single citation and every single survey report from code, and the computer will just churn away and produce all of them. As I said, it takes about 4 hours to do all of the citations, so it's something you might want to set at the end of the day and then come back tomorrow morning and find them all sitting in a folder. Let me just switch back to this. So we've done that. So what this means is that that we can keep all of those things up to date. And there's a fairly simple system, and it requires any NEYEDC staff to be able to read and understand and run our code. And that was entirely deliberate because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to learn about R. They wanted to be able to build up their in-house skills and understand the system, see how the system works, so that they can then take this example and perhaps apply it to other things. It would be possible to hide this code behind a web app and create some nice buttons to produce the outputs. And in fact, I'm doing something very similar for Record, the Cheshire Region Record Centre, for their data search service. So they've got a web app and it runs the data searches and creates the reports in a very similar way to the one that you've just seen. And that means that their team don't need to know how to use R to be able to run it and get the benefit of it. And of course, you could adapt this to any local wildlife site data system, or indeed any other types of data where standardized reports need to be created. And in fact, I did something very similar for the River Tame Conservation Trust Bird Atlas. So this is a website, but it uses the same technology to create these species pages. So here we have a page all about barn owls in the River Tame catchment, where their distribution, their abundance, winter and summer, and then some information about how that's changed from the previous atlas. So these web pages created in exactly the same way that I've just done a template which then you provide different data for different species, and we get the those outputs we can then build into a website. So in summary, open source software, in a particular R, provides a range of tools that can help you speed up the creation of reports, save time, and ensure you get standardized outputs. And for NEYEDC, they've now got an entire library of citations and survey reports that are available to provide to customers immediately, and they can be easily updated every year with new survey data. So hopefully this gives you a flavor of the possibilities that adopting open source technology into your workflows can give you in working with ecological data and creating usable, potentially interactive as well, outputs for those that need them. So thank you. Thanks very much for listening. Please do visit our website or find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, happy to answer some questions.